No
All
problem.
right. You all have joined into entrepreneurship in the emerging market. I think it's a really, really interesting topic and appreciate Stephen Brown being our speaker and one of our sponsors today. And he makes it available so people all over the world, including in emerging markets, can participate in this event today for free. Some people chose upgraded tickets, but it's available to everyone all over the world. So thank you all for participating. Wanted to share with you a little bit about our next speaker, C. Stephen Brown. He is a recognized innovator, and in 2023, he was 50 under 40 in the Global Junior Jubilee honoree. C. Stephen has led over 100 web, mobile, and accessible focused projects. He's the founder and CEO of CSB Technical Emporium Ltd. He delivers e-commerce, SaaS, and digital technology solutions across the Caribbean and North America. He's the author of Cracking the E-commerce Code. The Bahamas, he is passionate about empowering. I'm sorry, I kind of slightly misread that. Author of Cracking the E-commerce Code, the Bahamas, he is passionate about empowering digital growth. So, Stephen, thank you for being here and take it away. Welcome to the main stage.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is C. Stephen Brown, and I'm the founder and CEO of CSB Tech Emporium, a digital-first technology and consulting company based in the Bahamas. As David would have mentioned, I'm also the author of the Cracking the E-commerce Code book series, which focuses on building and scaling digital businesses in emerging markets, including the Bahamas and the wider Caribbean. Today, I'll be speaking about entrepreneurship in emerging markets. This is not a theoretical talk. This is grounded in lived experience. It's about exactly what it takes to build, grow, and scale businesses when resources are limited, systems are imperfect, and you don't have the luxury of excess. Whether you're joining from an emerging market or from a more developed economy, my goal is for you to leave this session with practical insights you can apply immediately. This conversation matters now more than ever. Entrepreneurship is often framed through a narrow lens that assumes access to capital, stable infrastructure, mature systems, and predictable markets. But for much of the world, that is not the reality. In fact, if you're from the Caribbean, you know that very well, and other places. However, emerging markets represent some of the fastest growing founder populations globally. They are seeing rapid digital adoption, not because it's trendy, but because it's necessary. And this is the key idea I want you to hold on to as I'm doing this presentation. Innovation driven by constraint, not excess. When you don't have unlimited resources, you learn to innovate with intention. That kind of innovation tends to travel well, scale well, and last longer. So, what exactly are emerging markets? When people hear the phrase emerging markets, they often think of a place on a map. But emerging markets are better understood as operating environments rather than locations. They are environments where founders deal with limited access to capital, infrastructure gaps, regulatory friction, and smaller or fragmented markets. Now, here's the important part. Those same environments also produce resilience, adaptability, and creativity. So today, whether you're physically in an emerging market or simply operating under emerging market conditions, this conversation applies to you. So I am based in the Bahamas, which some people consider part of the Caribbean. others do not. But I'm based in the Bahamas, and for this argument, for this discussion, for this presentation, we are going to look at it as an emerging market. And this region offers a very real world lens into what emerging market entrepreneurship looks like. We operate within small island economies. Local markets are limited, imports are expensive, logistics are complex, and digital transformation often happens unevenly. Because of this, Caribbean founders don't have the luxury of thinking only locally. In fact, if you design a business that only works in your home market, you hit a ceiling very quickly. To give you some context, the Bahamas has a population of 400,000 people. This is a small fraction of a small city, for example, in the United States. So, global thinking is not a growth strategy. It is a survival strategy. And this way of thinking often prepares founders extremely well for regional and global expansion later. In emerging markets, constraint is not temporary. It is the default. Founders often have fewer second chances. Lean execution is not optional, and mistakes cost more, not just financially, but emotionally and operationally. However, constraint has a hidden benefit. It forces founders to prioritize what truly matters. It strips away unnecessary complexity. It teaches discipline early. Over time, constraints shape better builders. My company is now 10 years old. It has taken us a long time to identify what things work in our market and how we can use that to grow and also scale beyond our borders. Due to the archipelagic nature of our nation, we have to also think about things like how do we get products from one island to the next if we're selling a physical product within our own country. So imagine if we're having challenges within our own country, what it takes for us to get it out of the country. So that being said, we have to now look at our constraints and use those constraints to help build ourselves to become better, to become stronger, to become wiser. Now, one of the things that, or one of the biggest, most common mistakes that I see a lot of founders do is they try to copy paste startup models from larger markets or more mature ecosystems like Silicon Valley. Those models assume abundant capital, deep talent pools, stable infrastructure, and large addressable markets. In emerging markets, those assumptions break very quickly. You end up with overbuilt products, burn-heavy strategies, misaligned growth metrics, and you aim for targets that don't match reality. Here's a simple truth. Context always wins. Successful founders adapt principles, not playbooks. So here's where the narrative shifts. Founders in emerging markets often develop advantages without realizing it. They build from day one. They build lean from day one. I actually listened to another speaker, and he indicated that one of the things that he is always encouraged founders to do is to not chase capital, to not chase making money, but to bootstrap from the ground up and ensure that they are retaining as much of their ownership of their company as possible. By doing so, they stay close to real customers. They validate quickly. they focus on practical solutions. These traits are incredibly valuable when scaling globally. And by focusing on these 4 traits, it helps us to focus on the main things that help us to grow our company. And in turn, money comes to you. Companies that want to invest into what you're doing will seek you out because why? They are now looking at what is it that this person is doing? How is it that they're achieving what they're aiming to achieve? How are they delivering what they are delivering? And in the grand scheme of things, constraint then becomes an edge when it's paired with intention. So we must design for global scale. And designing for global scale does not mean launching globally on day one. In fact, you should start local, but think global. It means making choices early that don't trap you later. You solve a local problem first, but you ask yourself, can the solution travel? Can it work across borders? Can it adapt to different regulations, currencies, and customer expectations? Small markets demand big thinking, not because of ambition, but because of necessity. When you design with scale in mind from the outset, growth becomes expansion, not reinvention. So as you see on the slide, small markets demand big thinking. As I mentioned earlier, using the Bahamas as an example, our population is only 400,000. If you think of numbers, if you think of what I said in the previous slide, if you focus on only your local market of 400,000 people, you have to now remember a portion of that market may not have access to the resources that are needed to access your services, particularly for a tech business like my own, where we offer website, mobile application, custom software, and game development services. But if 100,000 people do not have access to a computer, another 50,000 persons are children, you automatically are now you automatically now lose 150,000 potential customers from your population. So by thinking globally, you now tap into a larger market. You now are able to access more people that can potentially become prospective customers. So again, design local, but build for global. Now you may be wondering, I'm a founder. I have a great idea. I don't really know how to get this out there. Well, technology levels that field, right? The game has changed where you no longer have to rely so heavily on tapping into somebody else's, as someone else coined it earlier, tapping into someone else's dream. Today, cloud infrastructure, low code tools, remote teams, AI assisted workflows, all of these items, they now enable small teams to compete with much larger organizations. What matters now is not where you're located, but how well you execute, how well you take the tools that are available to you and allow them to enhance what you are already doing, what you are already offering, and how you can present that to your potential customer. Technology is no longer a differentiator on its own. It is now a multiplier. Used well, it gives founders leverage. Used poorly, it adds complexity. So this is where experts can assist you with enhancing your workflow by taking your idea, your project, your innovation, and enhancing it with other tools, other ideas that can help to bring depth to what it is that you're offering to the wider ecosystem. So I would like to present to you a practical tech stack, something that's focused on enablement, not complexity. Because in emerging markets, the goal is not to build the most complex system. The goal is to build the most useful system. Focus on enablement, not complexity, as I mentioned. Technology should remove friction. It should make it easier for customers to buy, easier for you to deliver, and easier for the business to operate consistently. How do you do this? You first do an assessment of what it is that your company is offering and identify, how do I make this easier for my customers to make that purchase? How do I convert them from going on my website, hitting my homepage, getting to my shop, selecting my product, and checking out? The faster you get the person to check out, the more likely they are to purchase your product or your service. So you do this by presenting a strong digital presence, and you can use social media. You can use your own website, which I highly recommend. In the age of AI, you can also create content that AI will now feed from to suggest to your clients or your prospects, here's what this company does, here's how it can lend a hand to you, here's how it can enhance your workflows, here's how it can enable the integration of payment processes, and so on and so forth. Here's how it can make your life easier. So again, technology should remove friction. Not everyone is technically savvy. That is a given. However, this is an opportunity for you to now lock in and research ways that you can adopt technology to enhance your overall business and its many facets. So this slide is a mindset check. We all love the idea of fast growth, but growth and scale are not the same thing. Scale is growth that your business can survive, whereas growth is demand. Scale is delivery. As you see on the screen, growth without control creates risk. Systems must support expansion, and discipline protects the business, especially in constrained environments. So, sustainable growth creates long-term value. And as it shows, as is displayed at the top of the slide, faster is not always better. Yes, we may want to make $100,000. Yes, we may want to get to that next ceiling in our business's growth. We may have hit $100,000 this year. We want to say we want to hit $250,000 next year. But these steps, they are all notches in your growth plan, and you need to identify a plan that will help you to get there without restricting yourself to the point that you are now focusing within a box, right? Remember, those founders that have become extremely successful, those business owners that are big in the world, Elon Musk, for example, they operate with a mindset that there is no box. So it is your job as the founder, as the business owner, as the innovator, it is your job to eliminate the walls that constrain you and think globally. Think, how do I grow from here? How do I scale? And of course, identify systems that will support that growth. So I want to pause here for just a moment. I want to present to you a quick founder reality check. This is not a worksheet. However, I am very welcoming of all comments and reactions. This is not a worksheet and you don't need to submit anything. This is simply a chance to reflect honestly, just for yourself. I'll present to you 4 questions, and I just want you to think. Let's start with the first question. What constraint is shaping your business right now? If you're willing to share, by all means, please drop a comment in the chat. I'll be happy to respond at the end. But these constraints, examples of these constraints could be capital. It could be time. It could be talent, regulation, or market size. Constraint isn't something to ignore. It is something to design around. So, what constraint is shaping your business right now? Second question. Are you optimizing for growth or for sustainable scale? Remember, as I mentioned a while ago, those are not the same thing. One creates momentum. The other determines whether you can survive that momentum. Third, what system would break first if demand doubled tomorrow? What would happen if you suddenly got 1,000 persons hitting your website where you normally get 100? Right? Would it be your payments? Maybe logistics and delivery? How about customer support? Operations? The answer to that question tells you where your readiness needs attention. And finally, what decision are you delaying that clarity would unlock? Most founders don't lack information. They lack the space to think clearly. For one, I delayed the adoption of an executive assistant because I tried to figure out how do I duplicate myself without having to coach somebody all the time into understanding how I work and how I can potentially offload some of that work onto them. It took me several months to understand which items I can repeat or establish into a repeatable system that I can then use to provide to someone as a standard operating procedure. And once I understood that the SOPs is what was missing, it gave me the insight that I needed to get what I needed for my company, which was someone that could sit side by side with me, identify, hey, Mr. Brown, here are the things that are missing from today's schedule. Hey, Stefan, here are the things that we can look at to enhance our revenue potential, and so on and so forth. Remember, you don't need to answer these questions perfectly today, but being honest with them changes how you build from this point forward. So I see that someone mentioned human resources and time is one of the biggest constraints in their business. So I'll give you a bit of insight as well as to what's happening here in the Bahamas. Our talent pool, particularly in the tech industry, is very limited. So as a result, if you're not importing talent to enhance what's already available locally, you become stagnated by what's available. So one of the ways that we have adapted to this scenario is we have outsourced certain items, or in the early days, we outsourced certain items. And as of now, we have now trained local talent to assist us with offering services locally at better prices, and of course, give persons better options that, if you're hiring us as a company to provide you with a service, you can now physically come to us and say, hey, I was wondering about X, Y, and Z. Now you can get that information on the ground in real time, as opposed to having to schedule something or the like. So remember, quick founder reality check. This is not for you to hammer yourself and beat yourself down. It is for you to get insight into what you are doing and how you can enhance what you are going to do tomorrow to bring yourself to the next point. Now we are looking at readiness before scale. In my preparation for this presentation, I saw a quote somewhere that someone said, "Scale only what is stable." Remember in an earlier slide, I would have said, it's not a race. You're not trying to get to that next point from day one. You want to do it in a method. You want to use a method that gets you to that stage, but you have to identify, are we ready? What are the things that are needed before you scale? I saw that David mentioned in the chat, repeatable systems, and he is correct. Systems, processes, compliance, team alignment. Scaling chaos only amplifies problems. Have you ever thought about what would happen if you were to expand your home and you do not have sufficient foundational work done at the ground level to sustain an expansion going upwards? What may happen? Your walls may crumble. You may have additional expenses that you did not anticipate to help yourself to rebuild what was not made ready beforehand. So you want to, as I mentioned, scale with clarity, as this will help you to multiply the impact of your scaling. So remember, before you scale, ask yourself, are we ready for scaling? Ecosystems are very important. No founder scales alone, especially in an emerging market. Remember, like I said, emerging markets, they have several constraints that kind of tie you down. However, that does not necessarily mean that you have to restrain yourself to those constraints. Ecosystems matter. Advisors, mentors, partners, platforms, and communities all play a role in accelerating growth and reducing mistakes. Strong ecosystems compress time. They help founders avoid learning everything the hard way. And in the long run, ecosystems accelerate growth. I'll give you a lived experience. In my early days, I had an opportunity to present to an enterprise level client a project, and in the long run, the project failed, not because of something that we did, but because of miscommunication at a higher level within the organization. My client's organization, that is. As a result, we ended up having the project scrapped and not launch under the initial client. As a result, I became discouraged. I started to question myself. I started to question whether or not it was worthwhile for me to even go forward, especially if here I am, a young entrepreneur, starting a company. This is my first big project, and all of a sudden, everything is coming crashing down. It makes you question a lot of things about yourself. It makes you question a lot of things about your company. However, I sought advice from friends, family, and others in the industry to get an idea as to what I should do next. I explained to my parents what had happened. I explained to my one employee at the time what was going on, as he was the one who actually presented the project. as I was traveling to do another project in another country. And he and I had a discussion. And as a result of everything, I wrote a very fiery, passionate letter that I was going to send to the manager of the company. And I spoke to my employer, I spoke to my brother, I spoke to my girlfriend, now wife, and I shared with them this letter. And they said to me, Stefan, if you send this letter out, CSB Tech is not going to have any business for any time to come. So keep the letter. Allow yourself to express your feelings and your emotions. But remember how this made you feel and allow it to help you to grow. And it was at that moment, which was only about 6 months after I would have opened my company, that I realized that for me to grow, I would need help from others, not just from my own thoughts, not just from my own path, but help from those on the outside who can see things in a different light. And this is where this slide comes into play. No founder scales alone. You want to grow. The popular saying is, no man is an island, but you need to understand that your village is what helps you to grow. So at this point, I want to zoom out beyond the founder. Entrepreneurship at scale requires alignment, education and skills development, modern digital policy, public-private collaboration. Entrepreneurship is a shared responsibility. In the past 6 years, we have developed applications across the Caribbean. In 2021, we would have developed an application called Accessibility Bahamas. It was the first of its kind and was presented at the level of the United Nations. This application was focused on persons with disabilities. And what made it the first of its kind is that the application was focused solely on that community of persons with disabilities. The application serves as an information hub for everyone in that community to be able to have access to the same quality and level of information as those without disabilities. This project inspired the United Nations Development Program to adopt the project and help and collaborate for the enhancement of the project. This allowed us to then introduce new features such as accessible transportation, job board, and everything else. Now, how does this translate to this particular slide? In Bermuda, where they had limited policies surrounding that community of persons with disabilities, we were then hired as consultants to develop an application similar to what we would have created for the Bahamas. In Accessibility Bahamas, we would have developed an application for Bermuda that now is being used to influence policy changes at the government level. It is now being used to allow or to encourage changes to happen within the country that will not only impact the persons with disabilities or that community, but impact the country as a whole. And this is where public-private collaboration is so important. Because here it is, we are a private organization, but assisting the government of Bermuda to provide better services for their community. And of course, as I always encourage persons to do, educate yourselves. Look for new skills that you can adapt and adopt. Those who adapt early will be more successful than those who are afraid of what's to come. We are in the age of artificial intelligence. We are in the age of technology that's growing at a scale that's potentially faster than we may like. However, this does not mean that we are automatically going to lose our jobs. This does not mean that we are going to be replaced by robots. What this means is that those who adapt to the ever-changing environment and think about ways that they can utilize this technology to enhance what they are doing, those will be the persons who are the most successful, particularly those who are going into entrepreneurship. So again, entrepreneurship is a shared responsibility. It is your responsibility as a founder, as a business owner, as a community leader, as a consumer. It is your responsibility to understand how entrepreneurship impacts your country, how entrepreneurship impacts you, and how you can make a difference. So, what does the next decade of entrepreneurship look like? What is coming next? The next decade of entrepreneurship will look very different from the last. There will be more globally distributed startups, more cross-border founders, more impact-driven businesses. The next global company or group of companies will come from everywhere. And many of them will be built in emerging markets like the Caribbean, like places in Africa, and so on and so forth. So if you have a great idea or you believe you have a great idea, this is now your opportunity to identify, how do I execute on my idea? Especially now that you have access to greater technology that will help you to get to that next level without a lot of friction. So what should founders do next? Here's some practical guidance. Here are some practical steps. Firstly, start where you are. You may only have $1,000, but use that $1,000 to maybe purchase a laptop that you can now use to open your web development business. Or purchase some stock, or not stock, but some inventory that you can now determine, how can I sell this to get the money that I need to invest into my company to now grow the company. Secondly, design for scale early. So remember, you don't want to scale too fast. You have to identify, am I ready? However, you design with scale or with an intention to scale. Okay. Thirdly, invest in clarity, not complexity. Many times we try to cover so many things in our first iteration that we lose focus on what is needed to get us to that first point or to the second point. So when we now go to design a product, or we decide, I want to open a business, we have to first identify, where do we start and how do we get to the end? So you have to establish a roadmap. In the grand scheme of things, you want to identify 3 things. What do I need to get started now? What things may be necessary to get us to that next step first? And then, what other things can I push into a later phase? So when a customer comes to me and we have a readiness assessment, or we have a strategy call, I always ask the customer to explain in their own words, what is it that you are aiming to accomplish? How would you like me to help you? And what are you willing to sacrifice to get to where you want to get to, or where you want to be? Because remember, one of your greatest resources, something that you can spend but never get back, is your time. So if you invest your time into ensuring that your roadmap is clear, it enables you to ensure that your execution is strong. And as I would have mentioned earlier, use technology intentionally. Do not be afraid to adopt and adapt. Those who are afraid to adapt, they will be snuffed out, for a lack of better words. You have to use technology intentionally to ensure that your company is not only viable, but competitive. Others in the market are offering the same products and services that you are. However, you have to be able to compete against your competitors. So, build locally, compete globally. So, before we open things up, I want to leave you with one final thought. If today's session surfaced questions for you or highlighted gaps or next steps in your own journey, we've created a practical landing page to help you to continue that work. That page is designed as a next step, not a sales pitch. You can book a complimentary strategy session where we take what you've reflected on today and translate it into a clear, realistic path forward. After that session, you'll receive access to the founder toolkit that we've created and other supporting resources tailored for your goals. There's no pressure to act immediately. This is simply an option available to you if and when it's useful. David, can you please drop that link in the chat for me?
Yes, I'll do that.
Thank you very much. But just to kind of read it aloud for those who may be listening and not necessarily reading, the website is csbtech.dev.gfis-2026. Remember, I work with those in the person with disability community, so I have to ensure that I am attending to everybody, because some persons may be, as I mentioned, they may be listening in, not necessarily reading and seeing what I am presenting on the screen. So I want to say thank you. Thank you for spending this time with me. I would love to open the floor for any questions that anyone may have. And I've also displayed on the slide here information that you can use to contact our company, CSB Tech Emporium. You can contact us by email, by phone, or WhatsApp. And of course, feel free to visit our website. Thank you. Now, do we have any questions? Do we have any time for questions? Let's see.
We do have about 5 minutes left, so thank you. Your timing was perfect. Thank you for the presentation as well. So relevant. So many of the members of our community, so many of the people who registered for this are in emerging markets. So really appreciate that you chose this topic. I see lots of reactions as well from people. So thank you for that. If there are questions, there's chat, and then there's also a question section. If you have a question and you want to put it in the question section, we will look at those first. And let me just see here. So a couple of things. Oh, you know what? I actually have mine in the question instead of the chat where I put your contact details. Sorry about that. I'll drop it in the chat as well. If there are any questions that you have, if you want to raise it, go ahead and feel free, and we'll try to answer those in the next few minutes. Again, a lot of positive comments, good talk on emerging markets, very relevant perspective, contact details, great session, technology, new rules, new perspective, the where to start, love some of those conversations.
Awesome.
So
Thank you.
Yeah, I think it looks like more really just super positive comments and reactions, but feel free, if you have questions, drop them in the chat. Reach out to Stephen Brown if you have questions as well. He's giving you all the contact details, email, telephone, which is probably WhatsApp as well, and then also website. And then check out that specific website here to take next steps. So really well done. Very, very interesting perspective throughout, and really an important perspective as well.
Thank you very much.
All right. Anyone else have any questions?
We have a question that came in. How should early stage founders in emerging markets think about scale without losing local relevance? So my answer to that would be, firstly, I think I would have touched on it in one of my earlier slides. You identify a problem that may not necessarily be specific to your country, but if you can find an issue that is specific to your country that you can focus on, they call it niching, right? So if you focus on that particular issue and you identify a way that you can tackle that particular problem and build it in a way that it can now apply to other countries, I think that will help you to identify ways that you can scale without losing that local relevance, like you mentioned. Because you want to identify ways that not only allow you to be present, but also be recognized. Because there's a lot of competition out there. So you want to ensure that you're standing out for something positive, and that will help you to become that go-to company for what it is that you're targeting. I'm hoping that answers your question, Divakar.
And so for a final question, I'll ask a question that was raised earlier that I think is really great, and I've been interested to hear each speaker's view on it, which is AI is such a hot topic in business right now. And so really relevant to your presentation, emerging markets versus, wealthy countries, a lot of talk in, US, China, not only talk, but a lot of action around AI. What about emerging markets? Is it an equalizer or is it a disadvantage? And maybe just share some perspective on AI.
Sure. I think it is an equalizer, as it now allows companies, founders, to add team members to their organization at a much lower cost. It allows persons to now identify gaps that existed in their company that they may have been considering, okay, how do I fill this spot without taking on a significant overhead of maybe salaries and so on and so forth. But it also gives them the opportunity to think holistically as to how can I now use this new technology to compete against the big boys, the big companies out there. So I think it's more of an advantage, an equalizer, than a disadvantage. For companies like my own, where we do offer particular services that AI can now somewhat create solutions for different companies. What I would say to that is where the expert still comes into play is that a lot of the AI produced products, they still require code cleanups and everything else to make sure that it performs well, and two, that it's secure. Because the one thing you do not want to happen is that you have a leak or a breach of data, and then all of your customers' information is now out there in the world. So the engineers, the programmers, they are very important still, even in the age of technology. So legal issues are arising globally because of the use of AI. And I think it's now time for that, some sort of partnership of sorts to happen, and that will help us to, become even more competitive.
I think it's a great response. I think AI is a bit of an equalizer, is my own perspective, and it creates higher value. Even as like a co-founder role, I use AI at times to answer questions that I don't have on my team. And so it's, some really strategic. And then I think for your business, it can add lots of there's still a need for someone to figure out how to do the technology, not just the coding. So, all right, thank you very much for your session today. Thank you for being one of our sponsors. You've made this event available to potentially thousands of people. I know we've already had over 500 people today participate. Maybe we're at 600 now. And so thank you very much for making that available to people all over the world, including
You're very welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.